A plague of divorces. Dobramizel had a name at that time for being a peaceful town, but unfortunately, not in the case of family life. Here, there had been trouble indeed. Many wives suspected their husbands of infidelity, and similarly, the husbands listened to tales about their wives carried to them by troublemaking neighbors. Not surprisingly, all this resulted in a high number of divorces. Rabbi Tanchum Shmuel was greatly distressed about this unhappy state of affairs, believing that this disruption of family life was a kind of curse. When either husband or wife would come to him with their tales of woe and complaints about each other, he would lovingly and patiently talk to them, try to show them where they were wrong and where they had failed each other. He would weep with them in sympathy for their sorrows and misunderstandings, and with tears in his eyes, ask them to take heed of the sayings of our sages warning against divorces. He especially called their attention to the Talmudic saying which stated that when a man divorces his wife, the altar itself sheds tears about it. Yet, despite all that Rabbi Tanchum Shmuel said or did, the misguided couples seemed to take no heed, and the number of divorces did not lessen. These divorces were a positive ruination to the moral and spiritual life of the Jewish community. When an ordinary Jew became divorced, there was still a possibility that the couple would repent, ask each other's forgiveness, and remarry. But in the case of a Cohen, of course, it was different. They were not allowed to remarry. Their proverbial hasty nature often proved their undoing. Rabbi Tanchum Shmuel would take the situation so seriously that he often called for fasts and special prayer that the people should realize the gravity of this unrest among married couples and to try to improve. He also called a large number of worshippers to accompany him to the cemetery for special prayers, but the hearts of the sinners remained unmoved, and the divorces continued as before. Then came Gavriel, his son in law, and things began to take on a different aspect. Rabbi Tanchum Shmuel saw how Rabbi Gavriel seemed to have a different approach to the problems brought to him. He had a talent for gaining the confidence of those who came with their troubles. He very carefully and sympathetically took notes of all the facts, sometimes taking several days before he felt he had a complete picture of the case and the reasons for the trouble. Rabbi Gavriel always made a special point of keeping each case as private as possible, for thus, he felt, there was a much greater chance of reconciliation. Otherwise, when outsiders got to know what was afoot, one would side with the husband and another with the wife, and the trouble became so magnified that the parties in dispute found it impossible to conceive of a friendly solution. In the majority of cases, Rabbi Gavriel was able to tell the couple that in the course of his several weeks' investigation he had ascertained that their worries were unfounded, being based on false information they had accepted as being the truth. He warned them against jumping to wrong conclusions when people who had nothing better to do came to them with their mischievous stories. Surely, he told them, your better half is a better friend to you than these troublemongers. Rabbi Gavriel was patient and gentle by nature, and had a great understanding, sympathy, and love for his fellow beings, and he strove to improve the relations not only between man and wife, but also between a man and his neighbor, for he knew how often one affected the other. He was determined to root out troublemaking gossip and slander from Dubber Mizzle, for he knew how such poison could ruin a whole community. Rabbi Tanchum Shmuel saw the extent of his son-in-law's success in dealing with the manifold problems brought along, and he was indeed happy to be able to pass them into the capable hands of Rabbi Gavriel to deal with.